Stay sunny where you are in Florida,
Georgia, or sorry, South Carolina, actually.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yep. Where are you at?
We're Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, okay. Cool.
How's children?
I've been there one time when I was really young.
Come back again sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
How are your children? Your wife?
They're doing well. I've got 5 kids under the age of 11, and so I'm a stay-at-home dad, and then but my wife has the day off today, so she's watching them in the house. So
You have you and your wife have a full-time job parenting,
yes, we definitely do. So
and you have the advantage of being able to watch them grow up.
yep. Yeah, it's been nice. I was in the cleaning industry for like 17 years, and then but we were just really struggling financially, and um it was starting to get to me physically too and everything. And so but my wife has a degree in interior design, so December 2019 we ended up making the switch, and she got an interior design job and I came home to stay home with the kids. And it ended up being perfect timing because then the pandemic hit, and my a lot of my customers were commercial customers that shut down, so we would have
Oh, fine.
we would have gotten hammered financially then.
Yeah. It was serendipity that you were, sort of took a hiatus from the business when you did.
Yeah, yeah, every once in a while I'm like, how in the world did that work out? Because that's kind of scary to go back and think if that didn't work out, where we would have been. So because
So
it was
now,
already tough enough.
so now you're into religious journalism, religious writing.
Yeah, yeah, that's been fun. But I've always wanted to write, and I've kind of done some blogging here and there. And then I was at Northern Seminary for the last 3 years,
Yeah.
and then uh, when I when I stepped down from my business to stay at home, I started writing blogging some more. And then Baptist News saw one of my articles about John MacArthur, and they really liked it, so they decided to post it. And then just kept on writing for him for about the last year or so.
I've got to ask you how you made the, if I may, how you made the journey from Bob Jones University to Baptist News. If that's too personal a
Yeah.
question,
Oh
please.
no, it's totally fine. Yeah. Yeah, I grew up very independent Baptist, KJV only type circles, and so Southern Baptists were liberals to us, which was a bad thing. Um, Even John MacArthur, we were told, was a compromiser. And so I went to Bob Jones, and then during my time there, I grew up very terrified of. My dad believed that you could lose your salvation at basically the drop of a hat. So I was always very scared growing up, especially with purity culture and left behind culture and everything. So um, I went to Bob Jones and uh, changed theologically to this very conservative evangelical Calvinist type position. And so then my wife and I got married, and we moved out to Denver to help start a church, and we were out there for 7 years. And then our pastor ended up getting divorced after that, and we were out there and just decided maybe God's calling it a chapter in our lives, and so we decided to come back home to South Carolina. And so I was at a mega church here, volunteering, leading worship, and then we had a worship school come in, and they were going to take a number of us on a year-long journey through development and stuff. And they told us on the first night that we needed to have God awareness and self-awareness. And I thought, well, my God awareness is totally fine, but I've never thought about my self-awareness before. So that night, I just broke down because they had us write down our top 10 high points and top 10 hard times in life. And like, I had no idea until seeing it on paper how hurt I was and how much I was using my theology to numb my wounds. And so basically over the next year, I started having to read authors that I would have previously called heretics, and started to have to face the wounds that I had. And as that self-awareness began to deepen and grow, my God awareness started having some questions. And but I really wanted to be on staff full-time at a church somewhere. And eventually that I couldn't get anybody to hire me because of my resume. I'd always been in church planting or in the cleaning industry. And then I eventually died to that dream. And when I died to that, I felt free to ask the questions I had been suppressing. And so that's when I ended up going to Northern Seminary, and my theology just completely really went down to the ground and just started to, piece things together from there. So
you had a theological overhaul.
oh yeah. And it began, it wasn't like an intellectual pursuit for me initially. It was more of it was a spiritual healing through self-awareness that then opened me up to see and love my neighbors as myself. And so that's where it grew out of. Is very much like the inward journey of Howard Thurman that he talks about, and then it just grew from there. So
You wouldn't have read much Thurman at Bob Jones University, I imagine.
no, I never even heard of him until I went to Northern. So let alone like a James Cone.
How did you find out about Thurman at Northern?
Yeah, so my I had a theology class, and I was nervous about it because I didn't want to just take another systematic theology class where I'm hearing, all these conservative evangelical white guys categorize everything for me. But they hired a professor for it that had graduated from Vanderbilt and had specialized, like he wrote his doctoral dissertation on Howard Thurman. And so he basically developed 2 entire classes about how to think theologically from the perspective of where like liberationist theology has more of a formative role than just something that's added on at the end of a theology class. And so we were reading quite a bit of different perspectives in that. And then, yeah, so he was the one who introduced me there. I mean, a lot of the classes there they would have us read liberationist theologies, but as part of the reading, but his was very formative on, building, you can actually build theology from this perspective. So that was really helpful. I'm still pretty new to it all, but.
Aren't we all?
Yep. So yeah, I just graduated in June, and it wasn't like a career move for me. It was more just where I needed to be in my journey at that season of life, and it's something I've always wanted to do. So
the journey continues.
Yep.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, what can an old, worn out preacher renegade in Arkansas do for you?
Yeah. So basically, like how we've done some of these conversations is kind of shared our story and then just kind of see how the conversation goes from there. And particularly like maybe like what kind of writing you've been doing, or how your writing has grown from your journey. Just kind of see where it goes, kind of open-ended from there.
I come at my religious writing probably in some of the most unorthodox kind of ways compared to many people with whom you may speak.
Mm-hmm.
My primary academic training is in law and jurisprudence and political science. I started divinity school in Southern Baptist Seminary Extension program after I'd become a partner in a law firm. And the Southern Baptists were going through their inerrancy mess. And I had enough of that to realize that I didn't want any more of it. And so I dropped that from my life and became a Cokesbury junkie. There was a Cokesbury bookstore back in the days when they actually had bookstores, Cokesbury bookstores. There was a Methodist church, First Methodist Church in Little Rock was down the street from my law firm. And so I became a self-read after I got through my Southern Baptist experience. I got self-read in systematic theology and comparative theology and liberation theology and other things. And at the same time, I was a pastor and I was doing some writing for a Black newspaper, a Black weekly here in Little Rock, an article series called The Pastor's Pen. The paper had been owned and founded by Daisy Bates, who was the Little Rock lady who, and with her husband, led Little Rock 9. And Ms. Bates was still alive, and she resurrected her paper in her last years. And I got a chance to write for them. I got into that, and what became for a fledgling weekly column turned into eventually Ethics Daily, now Good Faith Media, got wind of me and began to and asked me to do some things. And I started submitting some sermon manuscripts and some columns to Ethics Daily when Robert Parham was there. Robert Parham was the executive editor there. And I did that for several years. And in 2016, after the 2016 election, in early November, I got the wild notion that I would take some of my writings and put them in a collection and publish a book. You know, I didn't think anybody would read it, and I didn't think anybody would publish it, but I figured, oh, what the heck. And to my surprise, Judson accepted the manuscript and agreed to publish it. And so my book came out, The Fierce Urgency of Prophetic Hope, in early 2017. And that's the rest is, I suppose, history. Good Faith Media became what Ethics Daily was, and Baptist News Global Baptist News reached out to me and asked first of all to do a feature, and I did not believe that I was the kind of person that needed to be featured because I'm something of a renegade, and I was corrected in my thinking. Some friends told me to get over myself, and after that, when David Wilkinson, who was Mark Wingfield's predecessor, pushed that envelope, and Mark began to ask me to write. I began doing some writing. My writing basically focuses on the intersection of faith and justice from a liberationist standpoint. I have the distinct pleasure of being from the state that James Cone was born in. And James Cone went to school in Little Rock, Arkansas, and taught in Little Rock, Arkansas, and uh, I have the blessing of having. I didn't go to seminary where liberation theology was an add-on. I read Cone and read Cornel West and read Michael Eric Dyson and read other theologians mainly because I didn't know better. I didn't know any
Mm-hmm.
better. Uh, and I happen to believe that that's how theology ought to be thought through. What some people call contextual theology, I call, you know, theology from the street. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I write about things, the intersection of faith and justice, as it affects people like me, but also people who have suffered the experiences of being marginalized, of being wounded by faith, of being wounded by what I now call hateful faith. Uh, and we now have a world, a society, really, that is being driven by hateful faith. And so those are the driving forces about which I write now.
Mm-hmm.
The struggle I have with it is having to uh, having to having to dial back my anger.
Yeah.
There are many ways, I suppose, that people get inspiration in writing. Uh, I still believe that I cannot write what I cannot feel. Uh, I write from my head, but I also write from my hurt and from the pain I see other people experiencing. And uh, I have lived in a period of time when I have seen religion underperform uh, and disregard the real prophets of our time. You know, I grew up watching Martin Luther King Jr. during the 60s and remember where I was when King was killed. I was sitting with my father at the dining room table when the news came on him. He looked at me and I looked at him. He said, "Well, they got him." Uh, and so from Martin King and Malcolm X and the intersection of King and Malcolm, and then James Cone and Samuel DeWitt Proctor and Gardner Taylor. Uh, Notice I didn't mention Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Uh, and 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 these giants, and then I came to know Henry and Ella Mitchell, and began to meet some of the giant women, Black women who were in ministry, Linda Hollies and Ella Mitchell, uh, and my worldview widened. I grew up Southern Black Baptist, uh, King James Version, National Baptist, uh, you know, basically white Baptist blackened.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the same convention that had ousted Martin Luther King Jr. because of his social justice focus. And as I came to understand that and dealt with the tension in my own spirit between the traditionalism, the traditional mindset, uh, the pietistic notion of faith that defines a lot of Black religion versus the prophetic expression of faith that King and Malcolm X and Gardner Taylor uh, and Samuel D. Proctor and others led. I was I was drawn toward the prophetic and away from the pietistic. It was an easy progression for me, but as a writer, that progression helped influence the way I express my faith in words. And so this is a meandering way of saying I never thought of myself as a religious writer until uh, people told me, you need to write, man.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, people were saying, you got all this stuff and you've written all these columns and you write these sermons, you live these sermons, you need to write. And my dear friend Alan Buzak, God bless him, and Dr. J. Alfred Smith Sr. from Oakland sort of nudged me even further. J. Alfred in a kindly rabbi kind of way, and Alan as a big brother saying, you better start doing this. You need to start doing this. And so I've done it. I have consistently wrestled with the notion that if I don't write, I am burying the light that God has given me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I have had to wrestle with being comfortable seeing myself as a writer, a theological source, a public theologian. Emily Town pushes me, and Alan Buzak pushes me, and so all these people who push me, and I think, well, these folks are pushing me. I guess I better not disregard them. But I sure don't feel like I'm as worthy of being read as they think I should be writing.
Hmm.
But it goes. I'm talking,
Yeah.
and so I'm talking to Rich Pitcock, and I'm wondering, what's a guy from Delight, Arkansas doing talking to a theologian about being a religious writer?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a theologian, but unless we
Oh,
kind of all
well,
are
now,
to some
come on
degree.
now. Come on now, Rick. Rick, what do you call somebody who thinks about God and life?
Mm-hmm.
But if not a theologian.
Yep.
So as one person who's an expert in self-deprecation to another, let's give each other some grace, okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Give yourself some grace, brother.
Yep. I wonder, like, what you're talking about some of that struggle that you have between the pietistic and the prophetic, and you felt more attracted to the prophetic. What I'm curious, like how the pietistic side, like what is that exactly that you weren't drawn to? Is that more of like the typical systematic theologian ideas type person who's not necessarily connected to real life hurts, or
How is the bias? That is a theological bias.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and in a real sense, I resented it.
mm-hmm,
I was offended by it because I kept asking myself, I mean, when I was moving away from the Southern Baptist notions of looking at stuff, I was reading Reinhold Niebuhr, and I was thinking, wait a minute. I moved from Reinhold Niebuhr to James Cone, and James Cone was more, Reinhold Niebuhr was more relevant to me than Paul Tillich,
mm-hmm,
certainly more relevant to me than Charles Hodge. And James Cone was more relevant to me than Niebuhr. And it was the fact that Niebuhr and Cone were wrestling with the ethics of faith, the ethics of our relationship with God, that love of God and love of neighbor as being part of the same construct and not sacred versus secular or social versus pietistic. You know, they're all one and the same. And
mm-hmm,
so I could not look at theology with the pietistic kinds of emphasis that one might traditionally think of in systematic theology. Okay,
yeah,
yeah, let's talk about salvation. Let's talk about the doctrine of sin. Let's talk about all these doctrines. But when you're dealing with the American form of apartheid that's been sacralized by theologians
mm-hmm,
and that has been blessed by everybody or ignored by the folks who are supposed to be the paragons of ministry, whether they're black or white, whether you're talking about Joseph H. Jackson in the National Baptist tradition, or you're talking about Billy Graham in the white tradition, you're talking about leading religious figures who want to talk about Jesus and salvation and God, but do not want to talk about the ills of life that were the things that are defining hurt and pain and struggle for so much of the world. And so that pietistic focus just didn't appeal to me. I went to law school because I wanted to make a difference in the world. I didn't want to spend my time thinking about jurisprudence, although I do. I wanted to spend my time thinking about ways to right wrongs, to do justice, uh, to restructure dysfunctional systems or to dismantle systems of oppression. And one of the systems of oppression I've come to understand was this is the religious system of oppression that basically sees religion as a way of evading responsibility for
mm-hmm,
social ills or disarming people who are faith from the responsibility of being co-laborers with God in the work of justice and grace and mercy in the world. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it does. I feel like so like one of the books we had to read was by Roger Olson, who's a pretty conservative white theologian. And in his introduction to the story of Christian theology, he talked about, like, he admitted a lot of the ethics issues that have been done by those who are in power throughout Christian history. But he said basically that he thinks that they got their theology right despite their ethics issues. And for me, it was like, I can't divorce ethics from your theology. And so to me, the ethics of power and hierarchy and abuse are flowing from a theology of hierarchy and power and abuse. And your views of justice, this retributive justice that they preach, people are mirroring that in the way they treat one another. Like, is that similar to what you're talking about?
Yeah, I had a signal experience years, 40 years ago, I guess now. There was a black preacher named William Augustus Jones, Bill Jones, who wrote a book, God in the Ghetto. And Bill Jones came and was a preacher in Little Rock at a ministers' conference at Arkansas Baptist College. And Bill Jones, during one of his sermons, uh, said something that goes just to the point you just made. And it's also something he writes in God in the Ghetto. He said, bad theology always produces dysfunctional sociology. And dysfunctional sociology produces demented psychology. No, bad theology produces demented psychology. Demented psychology produces dysfunctional sociology. Dysfunctional sociology always produces oppressive anthropology, and then they always produce oppressive economics and ideologies. He said it all flows from bad theology. If your notion of God is wrong or flawed, your notion of self and others and power is wrong. To your point you just made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I've tried to spend my efforts. Uh, Part of what I'm wrestling with in the current moment we're living in is the the underperformance, the underperformance of faithful people in the face of glaring oppression, whether it's the glaring oppression of environmental injustice, climate change, global warming, rising sea levels, people being displaced because of droughts and floods that are related to the the wrong use of human power and the exploitation of the environment, or whether it's the oppressive realities of racism and sexism, homophobia, transphobia, the oppression of xenophobia, the ways that authoritarian faith uh, has become sacralized and even embraced what can only be called neo-fascism, and the relative silence of the faithful community in the face of that. I believe that 15 years from now, theologians and religious writers and religious historians are going to look back on this time and ask, what in the world was happening that people of faith were not leading the voices of, of protest. We're not leading the cries against neo-fascism, about authoritarianism, about the exploitation of the climate and the environment, uh, about the gross wealth disparities. That people of faith were not talking about that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people are, why were people of faith not talking about the fact that we've got two guys, Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, trying to figure out how to spend their money going into space on a junket?
Yeah.
When we have people who are living in the streets during a global pandemic and are being put out of their homes, or we have realtors who are fussing because they can't put them out of their homes. And the most important thing one of people want to talk about is two guys trying to do a private space race. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that people are going to ask, why in the world we talk about that? What happened to us?
Why do you think white evangelicals not only don't want to talk about it, but are just in denial that those are even problems that exist?
The word denial is the exact word. Well, I think that involves coming face to face with white supremacy. For the first time in our history, white supremacy is becoming more and more challenged by more and more people. And white evangelicals want to have nothing to do with the conversation about the complicity of white evangelicalism and white supremacy. And part of that conversation involves the way wealth has been misused, whether you're talking about the Waltons who engaged in wage theft to become billionaires because they didn't pay their workers well or didn't provide benefits to their workers. And now you've got a family of billionaires that are defunding public education and on the one hand, and trying to talk about being philanthropists on the other hand. Or whether you're talking about Jeff Bezos, who is talking about how well he's redefined retail while he has an oppressive way of getting his money. And white evangelicals don't want to talk about that because that requires them to go way back and look about how white faithful people have turned a blind eye to oppression of workers and oppression of people of color and oppression of women. And they're in denial about that. So it's a whole lot easier to talk about these other issues, inerrancy during the 80s, or complementarianism during the 21st century, which is just another way of saying exploitation and denigration of women and sacralization of misogyny. Uh, but it allows them to sacralize these conversations that are and not talk about the sin of abusing power based upon white privilege or male privilege or wealth privilege. I think that's the reason. I and I think it's again goes to theology.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you read, if your theology is wrong, your hermeneutics are going to be wrong too. And so, you know, your if your theology is wrong, you read the Great Commission as a license to go proselytize, as opposed to a mandate to do love and justice, and to model love and justice, and to call on the society and the world to be instruments of love and justice. But if you've spent your entire life talking about private morality as opposed to communal justice, communal healing and health, you can't find comfort dealing with the issues of injustice and the issues of liberation theology that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the denial is easy. You know, Billy Graham did. You can't find 5 sermons Billy Graham preached about racism or poverty or income inequality or the the wrongness of militarism. Billy Graham, and Billy Graham is a hero to this day. But whether it's Billy Graham or it's, as I was thinking this morning, Bill Bright for Campus Crusade for Christ. Because see, I come from the age in the 60s. I was in college in the late 60s, and Bill Bright and Campus Crusade for Christ was making their way. Well, the people who grew up with Campus Crusade for Christ in the 60s are the Fellowship Bible Church folks in the 2020s.
Mm-hmm.
They're the big box non-denominational in-denomination churches. They're the John MacArthur kind of churches. They are the neo-Calvinists. Well, they're not really good Calvinists, but
Yeah.
I mean, in the true sense, because Calvin had a real sense of social justice. It was not all pietistic for Calvin,
Mm-hmm.
but but that kind of orientation allows people to be in denial about social injustice. That's how they can spend an entire year talking about scripture and never talk about Amos or Micah or the social justice messages in Jeremiah or Isaiah. They can spend a whole lot talking about the purity code or the holiness code, but not talk about reparations or restitution or worker justice. And they don't spend very much time talking about the issues of xenophobia
Mm-hmm.
and the rather interesting dynamic that we have people who call themselves followers of Jesus who are hateful towards immigrants when Jesus was the immigrant in chief. I mean, you can't be more immigrant than Jesus.
Yeah.
And you've got these people who jump up and down and become cheerleaders and counselors to people who are anti-immigrants, anti-religious minorities. And the religion of Jesus was a minority religion. The religion of Jesus was a minority religion. The religion of Moses was a minority religion in its time. And so we have this denial of the real issues in our faith system that people don't get a chance to hear because they're listening to pastors and teachers who don't bring the perspective of liberation theology or sense of prophetic faith that you and I have come to know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Cornel West wrote about it very well in his 2004 book, Democracy in America. I mean, democracy matters. Democracy matters. Uh, he talked about the tension between Constantinian Christianity and prophetic Christianity. And what we have is basically a Christianity that is more Constantinian than is prophetic. That's why religious nationalism is so popular. And religious nationalism makes it easy to be in denial about everything about justice.
Yeah. So how do you, I mean, I feel like the natural response to all this stuff, it just feels like it's angering. It is very angering. Like um how do you find a place of like being at home in your anger?
Alan Buzak wrote a book titled Dare We Speak of Hope? And in that book, Buzak reminds us that something that Augustine wrote. Augustine said that hope has two daughters, uh, courage and anger. Anger at the way things are, and courage to speak from the anger about how things can and should be. And I find that I can be faithful to my anger when I, number one, don't deny it, express it, and express it from a standpoint of sensitivity that the anger I am in touch with is an anger that is divine. That God is angered by the way we mistreat each other and mistreat ourselves and mistreat the world in which God has placed us. That God is wounded and that our oneness with God, and I speak of that oneness often, our oneness with God should inspire and impel us to be at home with the anger. And yet and still, our oneness with God should inspire and impel us to speak courageously from that anger about God's love for God's humanity and God's call for humanity to be instruments of healing and grace and hospitality and liberation. That is the imperative that I have as a writer, to speak honestly about the anger and to, from that honesty, hopefully try to present a courageous message that calls us to act with God as agents of God for liberation and justice. If I don't do that, I'm just having a rant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I need to have a rant every once in a while. I have to have an outlet, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But my rants are not worthy. My rants are not worthy of serious reflection. I mean, you know, uh, theological gas is just like digestive gas. It's necessary, but you don't really want it. It has no nutritional value.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I've got to be careful that my rants are not the things that I want to present as food. I need to present prophetic rage, prophetic reason, and call people into understanding a prophetic relationship with the God who calls us to be people of love and justice, grace and joy and hope. And to remember that the message of our faith, the real gospel of our faith, is that the sovereignty of God is both the foundation of my faith, but is also the direction I need to be presenting in my writing. That somehow my anger, somehow my hope, somehow my prophetic call needs to find some connection with the sovereignty of God and the notion that we are part of what God is about in the world. That we either are part of what God is about in the world, or God has issues with us, and God has something to do with correcting us in order for God to get what God wants done in the world accomplished. Now that's a rough way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I
Where do you?
wrestle with it. I struggle with
Yeah.
I struggle with the anger issue.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle
Yeah,
with it.
because I feel like a lot of the, like, I grew up in the very white conservative evangelical churches that's got the coffee on Sunday morning and the nice band and the lights and the everything. And so when I get on social media and I point out some, like, the angst against critical race theory or different things like that, then I'll get people thinking like, well, you sound so angry, you're too negative towards the church, you're being too picky. And I struggle with, I need to give voice to this, uh, but I think that anger and courage thing definitely helps.
I think that we've been too nice.
Yeah.
And I think part of why people push back at us when we say, hey, uh, how dare you come down on CRT? Number one, it's hypocritical for you to come down on CRT when you were never critical of white supremacy and the misuse of the religion of Jesus to be complicit in white supremacy, whether it's in apartheid in South Africa or Jim Crow segregation in this country, or the mistreatment of indigenous people in this country and elsewhere around the world, uh, or the way that you misunderstood or misused the gospel to license missionary ventures, which were really a way of laying the groundwork for imperialism and colonialism and commercialism and commercial exploitation of minerals and land in places in Asia and Africa and the Americas. I think we have to be angry with that and own that and say, listen, uh, I'm not going to be lectured by people who have made it their business to walk by on the other side of the Good Samaritan's highway and go on down the road and ignore the bleeding, beaten people on life's highway in the name of their piety.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the anger is healthy. I think the anger is necessary. And I quite frankly think that one of the things that we are seeing now, aside from the folks at CRT, is the new wedge issue that the neo-fascists are hoping to get white religionists uh, to look at in order to believe that they've got to protect Jesus
Mm-hmm.
somehow, that they're standing up for Jesus by by fighting critical race theory,
As if it's a threat.
as if it's a threat, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to call out the hypocrisy. And I quite frankly, I may take too much joy in calling out the hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's joy because I realize that this is what I feel like I'm good at, or whether it's joy because I realize, wait a minute, you were wondering how God allowed you to get all these legal skills and analytical skills and writing skills, and now you know. This is why.
Yeah.
Because you are able to dissect and debunk uh, and deconstruct these fallacious arguments and present them um, as heresies. They are heresies to the gospel of Jesus. They're heresies to the notion to the great imperatives of love of God and love of neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Do you
think
feel?
that anger is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like maybe like part of liberation is freedom from oppression, but another part is freedom towards wholeness? Do you feel like maybe right now we're more in a season of, until we admit the oppression, we're just going to be in a season of having to face the oppression until evangelicals are willing to admit that, and we can't really get toward the wholeness quite yet until we're ready to deal with the oppression that we've caused?
I'm going to say something that probably will seem sacrilegious. I believe that God is going to have to save the world from evangelical Christianity before the world can be saved, because evangelical Christianity has been complicit in and with so much of the oppression in the world. And what we are going to see is the prophetic expression of the religion of Jesus being more and more challenged to confront the heresies of evangelical Christianity in order for the gospel of Jesus to be accepted as real. You left independent Baptist life. I discontinued calling myself a Christian. I call myself a follower of Jesus. The congregation I lead is Baptist in its polity and Baptist in its notion of the freedoms. But it does not identify with Baptist orthodoxy in the real, in the traditional Baptist sense. We're not part of a majority Baptist, Black Baptist tradition. We discontinued affiliation with the National Baptist Convention. We have more. We were partially for a while affiliated with the Cooperative Baptists, but because the Cooperative Baptists were so double-minded when it came to, and quite frankly, in my view, insincere when it came to LGBTQ inclusion, with their so-called Illumination Project, I became disenfranchised, disencanted with that. And so the prophetic notion of expression of faith, where we begin to talk about the way power is misused, the way wealth is misused, the way wealth is worshiped by people of faith, and particularly by organized religion, by evangelical Christians, how mammon has truly become God, and the ABCs of faith are attendance, billings, and cash. We are going to see more and more of the challenge being for people of prophetic faith to say, part of what's wrong with the world is that we bless stuff that God curses, and we're cursing stuff that God blesses. God blesses inclusion. God blesses hospitality. God blesses honesty. God blesses humility. God loves the people who struggle. God loves people who are merciful and kind. And God curses haughtiness and arrogance and bigotry and hatefulness and cruelty and viciousness. But we've blessed every war we could ever fight, as long as we could pray over it. And we have blessed every rich thing that we get, as long as we get a tithe from it. And we've not asked ourselves, what's the relationship between religious tolerance of environmental devastation and cancer clusters along the Gulf Coast, or climate change, or the loss of lowering of water tables in the West? We haven't asked those hard questions. And more people of your age are forcing us to do that kind of thinking. But they're doing it from a prophetic mindset as opposed to from the traditional evangelical mindset, because they found that when they go through the evangelical approach, the focus is on getting folks into the church building so they can get bigger buildings and have bigger campaigns and put up new schools in the schools where we can train minds to believe in religious nationalism and put a big flag in front of the church so we can pray over the next war. Mm-hmm. and bless the next Walmart. Am I making sense?
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, we have come to the point where the religion of Jesus became better known for blessing Wall Street and the Pentagon than blessing workers and peacemakers. And so the religion of the immigrant Palestinian rabbi who was murdered by an empire has turned to a religion of people that glorify capital punishment, lionize police, even if they're abusive and homicidal, sacralize wealth, and disparage people who are poor and needing asylum from war and violence and cruelty and hunger and disease. We do God an injustice if we don't write about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we do our brothers and sisters in the faith an injustice if we do not ask them to think theologically about this and ask them, is this truly faithful to the lesson of God that we have been handed down through the prophets and from Jesus? I think that's our calling, and that's a good calling to have. It's also a hard calling to have, because as James Cone said, well, it's a hard calling to have until you do what James Cone said. James Cone would ask, how can you do this? James Cone said, well, James Cone said, as only Cone can say, well, I don't really have a problem because I don't want very much. I'd never wanted to be a bishop. I mean, you know, if Jesus never wanted to be a rabbi in Jerusalem, and so he could always he resisted hanging around Jerusalem very much, and never wanted to be king. He never wanted an empire. And if we resist the temptation toward empire, we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when we start thinking about, well, let's see, how am I going to get from where I am to retirement? Where's the pension plan? How much do I have in the 401k? Or how much does the church have in the capital campaign? Or how much do we have in the reserve fund? Or how much does the school have in the endowment? And when we start focusing on those things, that's when we begin to become less prophetic and more Constantinian, because we become captive to our wants, as opposed to being co-laborers with what God wants. You know, and that's what I kind of keep reminding myself. Wendell, you can do this if you stop. If you don't think so hard about tomorrow. If you think about the God has given you light for the day, given you light on the issues of the day, and given you a voice to speak to those issues, and do that as faithfully as you can, with as much clarity as you can, and as humbly as you can, with the same honesty that you would ask others give for you, and then let God worry about how big the congregation is going to be, or whether or not you're going to have the endowment for the seminary or for the school, or whether or not you're going to have the college fund. Now, I think that's our real challenge.
Yeah, because I think like that really resonates with my personal story, where for me it wasn't even just that I couldn't be prophetic before when I felt like I needed to have that full-time church job somewhere, but it was that I felt like I couldn't even ask the right questions, or didn't even know what questions to ask, because I wasn't free from that Constantinian idol.
And when you realize that God's got this, I mean, it's not being simply simplistic. It's being truthful. If you realize that, as my mother used to say, worry never helped the cause. Otherwise, the world would be better. Uh, if you realize, as Jesus said, you can't add a single day to your life, or to paraphrase Jesus, you can't add a single cent to your wealth by worrying about how much you have. You got to live for the love and justice and presence of God, and do that, and God will make the economy of God works if we work to do the just will of God.
Mm-hmm.
But the economy of God cannot be gamed by our worry. And what I've found is that when I stopped worrying, or whether or not I needed to try to move from one church to the next, but started trying to be faithful to the light that God given me, I had a peace about what I was doing, and I had clarity in what I was writing. Even though I find myself being very much on the outs of many of the Black preachers that I know, not only in Arkansas, but around the country. You know, I'm a Black, cisgender, welcoming, affirming woman, embracing in ministry, anti-war, anti-capital punishment, uh, anti-racist, and openly skeptical person towards traditional notions of law enforcement preacher in the Bible Belt South.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a recipe for getting a big church.
Yeah.
And it's not a recipe for getting picked up by big religious uh, journals, evangelical journals. Christianity Today doesn't want you.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't want a Black preacher who writes from that perspective.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Christian Century doesn't want you to write too much from that perspective, because they want to make sure they keep their readership. They can have one or two articles about that 2 or 3 times a quarter, but not very much.
It's Constantinianism again.
It's Constantinianism again. I mean, that's why Cornel West couldn't stay at Harvard.
Yeah.
Harvard wanted Cornel West, uh, but as C. Eric Lincoln wrote about King and Black preachers, the white politicians and white religions love to pimp King's prestige, but questioned his relevance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that I think we need to be careful of, that people will pimp our prestige as followers of Jesus, pimp our prophetic prestige, but question the relevance of our witness and our insights.
Yeah.
You know, people love Barack Obama and never noticed that Barack Obama never would have become known but for the prophetic inspiration and challenge of Jeremiah Wright. And people ignore the fact Barack Obama ditched Jeremiah Wright as soon as he launched his campaign for president, and has spent his entire presidential career denigrating the prophetic messages that Jeremiah Wright speaks to.
Yeah.
And so that Constantinian devotion. Barack Obama is example of Constantinian politics. And we have people in the faith who still like Constantinian politics and don't understand that you cannot be in love with Constantinian politics and have a prophetic faith.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Barack Obama presidency, it was like it helped people feel that they had permission not to see themselves as racist, but then they were obviously come 2016 unwilling to actually deal with the the underlying racist systems and everything.
Yeah, how can you go from Barack Obama and believe that you have voted for Barack Obama because you're not racist, and then you vote into office a man who has been a career racist,
Yeah.
personally, professionally, and commercially, and politically, and then in 2020, 84% of evangelicals go with this guy. So,
And if you point that
that
out, they
has
say,
to
well,
speak
not
to the
all
white
evangelicals.
supremacy. Yeah, well, the truth of the matter is, you don't have you don't have Donald Trump if evangelicals don't support it.
Yeah.
You don't you don't have you don't have Donald Trump's presidency in 2016, and you don't have the insurrection in 2021, and you don't have Donald Trump still being a force in the Republican Party if evangelicals were not in lockstep with the racist, imperialistic, nationalistic, capitalistic, and neo-fascist messages of Donald Trump. White evangelicals have embraced that. And otherwise, you don't have that. And they've embraced it because they don't want to have the notion of white supremacy being displaced by an ethos that is not patriarchal, that embraces the agency of women and girls to act independently of the so-called headship, the paternalism of men, and believes that people of color have not only the right to liberty, but have a right to have their perspectives on faith and public policy not only considered, but tried. I mean, we've dealt with a couple of 100 years of imperialism and capitalism and racism. How did John Lennon say, can we give peace a chance?
Yeah. And even longer for Constantinianism.
Yeah, even longer for Constantinianism. Can we give peace a chance? I mean, we have seen what religious nationalism does. Can we see what inclusion will do?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what the religion of Jesus involved? Isn't that why Constantine basically decided, I've got to co-opt this religion because I cannot conquer it? I tried to persecute it to hell, and I couldn't kill them. I couldn't torture them to death. I've got to co-opt them. And so Constantine basically decided, if I cannot conquer the religion of Jesus, I will co-opt it. And the people of the organized religion were just so happy to move from the persecuted to the empowered, that they did not realize that they'd made a Faustian deal.
Yeah.
I'm probably wasting your time, brother.
Oh no, you're not. This has been really good. It's been really helpful. I feel like I'm trying to I want to write from a place of like um a contemplative presence of feeling home in who I am and my relationship with my neighbor, but also having this liberative anger within me as well. And I think this conversation has been really helpful for helping me navigate those two.
I tell you what's really been helping me. I am really helped by Alan Buzak. I don't know if you've read very much of what he's written.
Mm-mm.
Alan Buzak, South African theologian, liberation theologian. Alan is my friend, my brother. I referred to Dare We Speak of Hope, his book. He has another book that was written recently, Pharaohs on Both Sides of the Blood Red Waters. I strongly recommend you read that because he writes the anger,
Mm-hmm.
but also the contemplative side of this. He holds it in great. And you're familiar with Walter Brueggemann.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Brueggemann writes the same kind of way, but Brueggemann and Buzak have really been helpful to me. I find, you know, I just finished reading Miguel de la Torre's Decolonizing Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Oh, the subtitle is "We're Becoming Badass Believers."
Nice. Yeah, I'll pick those up.
It's yeah, and I cuss a little bit, okay?
Yeah, you're
And
fine.
Miguel de la Torre in this book coins a Rastafarian term, shitstem, shitstem, and mentions the shitstems of mass incarceration, the shitstem of criminal justice. And I read these books from these people and they help me. So I suggest you get to that. And then you probably have read Aubrey Hendrix's The Politics of Jesus.
I haven't read that one, no.
I would encourage you to read Aubrey Hendrix's The Politics of Jesus.
Okay.
Because it opens up the ethics of the religion of Jesus in a very good and accessible way, and allows you to be in touch with both the anger and the courage.
Yeah, that really helps. I'll definitely pick those up.
Joel Goza has written God's Unholy Ghosts. And Joel Goza's book on that is wonderful. And then the other thing that I have been I keep a testament of hope behind me, which is the writings of Martin Luther King Jr., because I have to remind myself that part of my job is to remind people that King did more than say, "I have a dream." and his "I Have a Dream" speech was in 1963. He wrote a whole lot between 63 and 68, and if you read his stuff in 67 and 68, most folks haven't read Where Do We Go From Here, which is the last book.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't read the posthumous essay that was written, that they penned, that was published rather, titled A Testament of Hope, that was published in January of '69 in Playboy magazine, of all places. Reading those things gets you and gets me in a good spirit, where I can hold my anger and my hope, my anger and my courage in balance, and I can write.
Yeah.
And I can write honestly and openly.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I
have
appreciate
read
you.
I have read some of your stuff, and you do good stuff, man.
Oh,
Keep
thanks.
it up, okay?
Yeah, I'll have to work my way through your articles now that I've had a conversation with you. So, but I really appreciate this conversation. This has been really, really helpful. So,
well, I'm sorry to have taken so much of your time. I realize I rambled, and I apologize.
oh, you're fine. It's nice. Oh, that's all right. I didn't want to interrupt you because it was so good. I just want to listen. So, but I appreciate
it.
it.
For you for? What can I do for
you?
you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know if you just want to pray for just to be present and courage, or have courage in the writing. That'd be cool.
Let's do that. God of hope and God of anger and God of courage and God of grace, give us the assurance that as you have been with prophetic people in every age, you're with us. I thank you for Rick. I thank you for Laura and the light you have given each of them. And I pray for Rick and Laura as they write from the light you've given them, that they trust that light in their lives to illuminate not only themselves, but illuminate the world around them, so that they can write, speak, present truth clearly, honestly, humbly, prophetically. I pray for them in their personal, in their domestic, in their physical, and in their professional lives. Help us to trust you even when we cannot trace you, when we do not know which way we're going. Help us to trust you in the darkness. And in this strange time in which we live, help us to trust your spirit as she wrestles with us and prods us and pushes us into uncommonly deep and sometimes turbulent waters and places where we encounter and write with anger, with courage, with love, trusting your hope. I pray for Rick and his family, for Laura and her family, and thank you for the work you've given them and for the work that they do at B&G. Forgive us, we pray, for the areas in our lives when we have come short of what we should be. And forgive, we pray, our timidity. Thank you for pushing us to the deep end of the pool, where we can not touch bottom. We must trust your spirit to call us deeper and farther out into your will. I ask these things in the name of Jesus, who has shown us what you are like and what you would have us become. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. God be
Yep.
with you.
Yep. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.